Hello again. The accusation has been levelled at me more than once that I'm some kind of old fossil who longs for the past and wishes to turn the clock back to the days of the British Empire. Perhaps there is something in this. I'm certainly a great fan of Baden-Powell and his philosophy, and I consider the three greatest Englishmen of all time to be Churchill, Cromwell, and the Duke of Wellington, in that order. I suppose that I regret the fact that any idea now of living cleanly and playing the game is viewed as being reactionary and old-fashioned. As a child, I read the Boy's Own Paper every week, and I thought the viewers might be interested to hear a quotation from Sir Stanley Matthews, the footballer, which was printed in the Boy's Own Paper in the 1950s, and gives a flavour of what was a perfectly normal sentiment at that time. I give a link to this in the description to this video. Here is what Stanley Matthews wrote. A small boy in one of our large industrial towns once asked me, "What does it feel like to play for England?" I could see that he was puzzled and very, very interested. "Do you play soccer, son?" I asked him. He nodded. "Then you know what it's like to play for England. Every boy in England who does his best to play a good, clean, worthwhile game is playing for his country." Every boy in England. A good, clean game. Playing for his country. These are the sentiments which I could wish were still common. I find nothing old-fashioned or quaint about this. It is, to me, quite sound. I mentioned Baden-Powell, who of course founded the Boy Scouts, and here is a book of his which I regard as being a pretty decent blueprint for young men to live by. It's called Rovering to Success, and it's not about scouting, but about life in general. Here is a section called Manliness. That's not a word you hear very often these days. Nor is chivalry, come to that. To me, being manly has a particular meaning, and Baden-Powell summed it up neatly. On page 110, we read, "A man without chivalry is no man. A man who has this chivalry and respect for women could never lower himself to behave like a beast." He goes on to talk of what chivalry entails. A chivalrous man must have sympathy for the weaker folk, the aged and the crippled, and he must give protection to the little ones. I wonder when viewers last heard anybody recommending chivalry in this way. When last did they hear the word chivalry at all, come to that? If we could only revive the idea of manliness and teaching young men to be chivalrous, then I have an idea that rape would become a great deal rarer than it is now. If we taught boys that they should stand up for the weak, look after children and treat women with respect, then I think that many other offences would also fall by the wayside. And just imagine the idea of playing the game, if that came back into fashion, and youngsters started to think in terms of being honest and noble. Does anybody really think that the country would be worse off if young men began following the advice of men like Stanley Matthews and Baden-Powell?